Hello and welcome everyone to National Manufacturing Day and a special program by Turnstile Tours that's going to visit the Brooklyn Army Terminal in Sunset Park live. So we're going to go live to factories and production spaces and speak with three different companies that have played a really important role both during the pandemic as well as just in general in terms of production for New York City. National Manufacturing Day is a celebration that takes place all across the country. So there's hundreds of sites that are participating. For Turnstile Tours, it's our 6th year of participating in National Manufacturing Day. In years past, we have taken people on tours that visit factory spaces. But today we're doing it in a virtual format and we're really looking forward to sharing this with you today. Let's talk about manufacturing. Manufacturing is still a critical part of New York City's economy. Really leading up to the pandemic, about 70,000 New Yorkers were employed in the manufacturing sector. Now, like many other sectors, the manufacturing sector has been hit by the pandemic and we've lost about 20,000 of those jobs. However, we've also seen from the pandemic just how important it is to have local manufacturing. As I mentioned, a couple of the companies we're going to visit today made products. They actually made products and components that were critical to the city's survival during the height of the pandemic. These companies were able to use their skills, equipment, and supply chains to mobilize and deliver medical supplies that were so desperately needed. And so how we're going to do this today is we are going to go live to a couple of my colleagues who are on the ground, including Andrew Gustafsson and Amanda Adler-Brennan, and they are actually live inside manufacturing spaces at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. As a little bit of background on the Brooklyn Army Terminal, it is a site that was historically operated by the United States Army. It was the center of the port of embarkation, mobilizing troops and supplies. Really at its peak would have been during World War II. But in the 1980s, the site was sold to the city of New York. And ever since, it has been a mainstay and a center of New York City's urban manufacturing. And so there are now about 100 businesses that operate there today, of which we're going to see 3. Before we do that, for those of you that are not familiar with Turnstile Tours, we typically do specialize in tours in person that we lead in partnership with different nonprofit organizations. In the case of the Brooklyn Army Terminal, we normally in typical times would be giving outdoor and indoor tours at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. But now we're doing this virtual program. And we're doing all kinds of virtual programs. So I'd like to share with you some of our upcoming programs before we go live to the Brooklyn Army Terminal, just in case you're interested in sticking with us on some of our other programs. This coming Sunday, we'll be joined by photographer Sean Carroll, who has started a project during the pandemic to document his yard, his block, and the city of Pittsburgh. And so he'll be sharing a photography workshop with us and some of his work. And then on Tuesday, we're going to go live to 2 different chefs at Thai restaurants, one in Georgia and one right here in New York City. And they'll be cooking with us and doing cooking demos and teaching us about how to cook with Thai ingredients. And then we're very excited about next Thursday at 3 o'clock. We will be hosting a special program for Made in NYC Week that will bring on organizations and manufacturers that specialize in inclusive design and employment for people of all abilities, including people with disabilities. So we hope you'll join us for that. Today's program is sponsored by the New York City Economic Development Corporation, and so we're so grateful to them for making this possible. But many of our programs that we do help support us and keep us going. And so in this case, we do have a membership program if you'd like to support our work that starts at $5 a month, and that helps us offer these programs on a consistent basis. So we are very thankful to those of you that can support us during this time before we're really opening up our in-person tours. And then we're going to now go live. So we're so grateful to have you with us. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Andrew Gustafsson to the program, who I believe is out in the atrium at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. Andrew, are you there?
Hi, everybody. So welcome. So I'm standing here in the atrium, which a space some of you may be familiar with. If you've been on any of our tours, or maybe you visited the Brooklyn Army Terminal, maybe during Open House New York, we're actually going to be doing another program from the atrium on October 17th, where we're going to highlight a few more tenants here at the Army Terminal for virtual Open House New York weekends. Normally, that is one of the busiest days of the year here at the terminal. So we're going to try and recreate that virtually, just like the whole weekend is with live events as well, and recorded and things like that. So definitely check out Open House New York. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to walk across the hallway. We're going to go visit with Makerspace. So we're going to walk together for a moment. All right. So we're walking into the space, and the founder, Scott Van Kampen, is going to meet with us in just a moment. So this is a space here, as Cindy mentioned, where folks can come and access tools and classes. And then, of course, they also have training programs here as well. But Scott's just coming here in a moment, and we're going to start talking to him. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
What's happening? Good to see you. Hello.
So thanks so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about Makerspace and how you got started?
Yeah, of course. Let's kind of wander through as we go, and I'll start talking just because I know Jim's going to be talking right here. We're passing some classrooms here. So Makerspace actually got its start about 8 years ago now. We converted my architectural and sculptural metalworking studio into the Makerspace after we were flooded in Hurricane Sandy. It was sort of an opportunity to switch gears, but also get back to the community, right? And we started in Staten Island with what is a 6,000 square foot space, and sort of shrunk down the metal shop, added a wood shop. We built a CNC router, a 4x8 CNC router, and started getting some extra equipment like 3D printers and laser cutters, and started really just teaching people how to make things, right? So we're a community-based nonprofit workshop, and let's kind of wander through here. So what that means, right, is that we have a whole host of equipment that people can come in, learn how to use, and we encourage them to start businesses in the space and actually earn money. So right here, we're passing, we've got several laser cutters between our two locations. So we're at the Brooklyn Army Terminal, as you guys already know. Between our two locations, we have 7 laser cutters, multiple 3D printers, probably about 12 or 15 3D printers, and lots of computers that people can come in and use. This space is laid out really pretty well that we're separate shops. Our Staten Island location is fairly tight, being 6,000 square feet. So half of that space, about 3,000 square feet, is industrial fabrication, hot works, metalworking, woodworking, and CNC routing. And the other half is studio spaces for our members there. We also have a great ceramics studio, conference room, and we have a radio station there called makerparkradio.nyc. And they're a nonprofit within our space, independent nonprofit from us, that actually got to start kind of throwing around some ideas, right? Because whenever you're in the shop, there's always music playing. And Tom and Kristen had this idea to start a radio station. And it got its namesake from our park directly across our street from our shop in Staten Island that we call Maker Park. And that is where we do outdoor sculptures. We have a residency where people can come in, learn tools, and then they get an opportunity to build a sculpture that they put outside for a year. And kind of a unique space, about 27,000 square foot outdoor park. So that's a lot of fun.
And people can listen to the radio over Facebook, right?
Yeah, so you can listen. They have an app, Maker Park Radio. Their webpage is makerparkradio.nyc, one of the best .nyc domains out there. I think they're in the running this year. They're running that competition, .nyc. But I think they've got about 80 or 90 DJs and all sorts of music genres, some talk radio, there's classic, there's hardcore, like heavy metal, there's punk rock, there's 70s, there's, salsa, there's all kinds of music. So anything that you can think of, there's a show for it. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. So when we kind of wander through the space here, one of the unique things about our space here at the Brooklyn Army Terminal is our sewing studio. So we're going to start here, and then we'll kind of work through some of the equipment. So back here we have our sewing area. We've got some professional Juki machines, some beginning machines. We also do silk screening. We have 2 vinyl cutters, as well as a 10-color embroidery machine. So the embroidery machine is a pretty amazing tool. And it's CNC technology. It's similar to a 3D printer or our CNC router.
And can you explain what CNC means for people who might not know that term?
Of course, yeah. So CNC is computer numerical control. And that's a language that machines understand. And we have programs that can interpret that. We don't write that code by hand. But we run that through a processor and say, like with this design, we have a vector file, which is just a line drawing. And then we give values to each one of those lines and say, well, this series of lines wants to be yellow, that's a black line, this one's going to be purple. And then this machine knows to change needles and colors, and it moves around and embroiders whatever that line is. So similar to the way the 3D printer works, in X, Y, and Z, this material actually moves around as it's getting embroidered. The needles stay in one spot. And with the 3D printers, the head actually moves around. And with each layer, so this is just a 2D CNC machine. But with the 3D printer, right, we have our X and Y, which is horizontal on the bed this way. And then our Z is our vertical height. And that machine will build up in layers, whatever design we're printing. Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about who are the members of Makerspace? Who uses this space on a daily basis?
So we have all kinds of people from all walks of life. We have people running businesses out of here. We work with some of the other companies in Brooklyn Army Terminal. We work with Jacques Torres Chocolates. He's a member here. Who we actually I gave a tour to Jacques and talking about our capabilities. And he was like, I was explaining to him how 3D printing works. And he found it fascinating. We got to sort of explaining, and he got to understanding those processes. And next thing you know, we're designing positives that we could 3D print that he could then take a vacuum form mold of and then make chocolate from there. So he was casting chocolate off of 3D prints that we printed. And so we would do the one, and then he could make multiples with his vacuum former. He has special, I forget what exact material it is. It's plastic sheet that when it heats up, it sucks down and forms around our 3D model. And then he was incorporating that in his chocolate products.
Oh, that's so cool.
One of the best things was that he gave us a giant chocolate bunny, of course, one Easter. But Cross Aerospace is in the building. We help them cut things from time to time. We do some water jet work and CNC work with them. And Lee Spring, right upstairs. We work with Lee Spring in a couple of ways. They're a great organization. We've helped them prototype some of their equipment, and we've worked with their engineers on some machinery, but also we help train some of their workers. So we have a program called Apprentice NYC in partnership with Small Business Services in New York City. And we take about 18 individuals, and it's a full-on sort of boot camp for machinists. And these individuals come in, we teach them all the safety of being in a shop, computer programming, manual milling, manual lathe work, and then we get them on our CNC machines. And after 10 weeks, 40 hours a week of working in our shop, They then spend 15.5 months on the job training with their employers. So we've given Lee Spring, I think, 3, maybe 4 employees that are up there that were trained down here. So we've run that iteration of Apprentice NYC a few times. Currently on hold because of the virus, but you know, hoping to get that rolling again here soon. So yeah, we kind of wandered through here. This is our 3D printing area. So multiple 3D printers. We have an electronics bench. We just got a metrology microscope, so we can take really intense looks and at tooling and machine finishes off of our CNC machines and our manual machines as well. So we're just setting that up. But multiple 3D printers, Formlabs resin printers. We have a resin printer at both locations, and a lot of cool things come off these printers. One of them, Jim here, is a puppet maker, and so he's done some really crazy, beautiful puppet heads, as well as hands and fingers and things like that for puppets. Yeah, it's a kind of a cool, very unique project.
Oh, that's cool. I know one of our staff members who's on behind the scenes today has actually worked in making puppets before,
right.
Stefan. So that's really cool. And so when we think of a makerspace too, you also have some other more traditional things like metalworking and woodworking in here too,
yeah,
right?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate to have a wide breadth of tooling and equipment at both locations. So traditional stuff, you know, welding, machining. This is our machine shop. So we have 2 manual lathes here. Actually, we have 3 manual lathes. One of them is a 1943 Logan lathe from, you know, kind of military green here. But it's a fun one to do classes on. And then we've got our Bridgeport style knee mills back here, surface grinders, measuring equipment, and then we have 2 Tormach 1100s. These are 4-axis CNC milling machines, as well as one of them has a lathe attachment, so we can do what this machine does, all computer controlled.
And what kind of, someone had a question here, which is what kind of processes for manufacturing can be computer controlled and what things can't?
I mean, that's a huge question. That's a great question. Let's kind of walk away from the air compressor here a little bit. So obviously when you have multiple versions of something, right? So, or you need a lot of parts of the same thing, CNC equipment really lends itself to that because it's a computer controlled machine. You set up a file and then it's just a matter of putting in the material and making the same part over and over. A lot of what we do is prototyping. So some of those prototypes you're not necessarily setting up a CNC machine for because you're only going to do 1 or 2, or you're working out your problems. You're sort of going through a design iteration phase, and you want to kind of be able to pivot and adjust and refine your design. So that's where you would maybe not use a CNC machine for that. But things like our CNC router in the wood shop, that allows us to do very complex things, cut out a sheet material, right? So where this equipment is working in metal, we can also cut out plywood, HDPE, acrylic, you know, out of sheet goods. So we can kind of wander over there. In fact, one of the pieces I'll show you here when we're walking by, that is actually very well suited for the CNC process is this project here. We worked with NYC by Design, and this X is a sample, sort of a dusty sample at the moment, that was produced as an award for NYC by Design. And we worked with their team and Cindy Allen from Interior Design Magazine to sort of work out what this wanted to be. So I think we made about 125 of these. And it's a big, thick chunk of aluminum. So there was a lot of, you know, a lot of machining that went into this. This started out as a flat block that was a little more than 8 inches long and about 6 inches wide. And then all of this material was cut out on the CNC. We're able to do this and make 125. Once we refined our design and knew exactly what they wanted, it became just a matter of cycling out the material. And then we've got 125 or 130 of these that went to finishing. This piece, we have this piece because this was a color sample. And you can see it sort of has some greens and blues to it. We had one that had some reds and oranges and really had a much nicer look than this one. And that's the one they took. That's one they decided. So they all got made and finished. This is a zinc chromate finish. And it's sort of unique. Every one of the X's that we made, it has a unique finish to it because the color on them is not controllable. So it was kind of a fun project.
We had another question here, which is, how have you had to adjust your space for COVID? And then, of course, we also like to hear about, a lot of the really important work that you guys did at the height of the pandemic in making personal protective equipment.
Yeah. So let's wander into the wood shop and we'll kind of talk about that stuff. So currently, we are running and operating on limited hours. We're 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. And, we're sort of building back up to membership and being able to have longer days. This is our wood shop. So in here, traditional woodworking equipment, table saw, chop saw, drill press, joiner, planer, band saws, panel saw. But we were talking just a little bit ago about our CNC machine. This is our 4x8 Shopbot. And it does get a little noisy. We keep it in a garage where we don't have to have the noise quite so much. But this machine, we were able to, when the pandemic really hit us here in New York City, we closed our shop on March 17th and immediately saw the need for face shields and the PPE. We were able to, with our equipment here and my resources, we were able to purchase several hundred sheets of PETG, which is the clear plastic they use for face shields. And we brought that material in, took a few days to get it in. But then we set up a program here and we were running out on our Shopbot, we were cutting about 25 sheets at a time with our CNC router. So this has a spindle on it. Think about like a drill press spinning around at about 12,000 RPMs. And as it's all computer controlled, right? So it would do slots and then do the cutout of the face shield. And we were able to do 40 sheets out of or 40 face shields out of each sheet. So when you think, you've got 20 sheets there, you're getting 40 out, you're getting 800 face shields. And it took probably about an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours to run one cycle. So we were able to produce, I think we spent about 2 weeks. And once they came off of here, with the cutting, we did assembly. So we put on the foam headband. We put on the headband and then the foam forehead rest. And we were able to actually, in a matter of just a couple weeks, make about 10,000 face shields. And those went right out to the city and local hospitals.
Wow, that's amazing. And we're also going to talk about, when we go to Lee Spring next, about some of the other work that they're doing as well to help with the pandemic. But Scott, this has been so fantastic. We're just about out of time, but if there are any other questions that people have, but I also just wanted to ask, how can people become members of Makerspace?
Yeah, so I said earlier, we are a membership-based nonprofit. Go to our webpage, come down, get a tour, see what we can do to help you guys make things. We haven't made it to the metal shop yet, but we do have welding, we have water jet, we have sheet metal equipment, we have shears, we have everything you need to work in just about any material. So our webpage is makerspace.nyc, and we're here in Brooklyn as well as Staten Island. And come out, learn how to make something, because there's nothing better than saying I made that.
Great, thanks so much. All right, Cindy, we'll turn it back to you.
Hello, everyone. So thank you so much to Scott Van Kampen at Makerspace for sharing their work. And we included their website and their social media in the chat, so you can definitely check that out. Next, we're going to go live to Amanda Adler-Brennan, who is a staff member of ours, who's on the ground with CEO Steve Kempf from Lee Spring. And this is a company that was founded in Brooklyn in 1918. The company's had a bunch of different locations in the borough, but they moved to the Brooklyn Army Terminal in 2008, and that serves as their company headquarters. And it's really one of their key production facilities, as we're going to see today. In addition to their location in Brooklyn, they also have 6 other factories in the US, as well as factories in the UK, Mexico, Germany, India, and China. And they manufacture, as we're going to hear about, more than 25,000 different kinds of springs. And these springs range in size from teeny tiny to absolutely like heart stents and medical devices to massive springs that might include like deep sea drilling equipment. So without further ado, I'd like to take us to Lee Spring and to Amanda, who is there with Steve, so we can learn more about their business. Amanda, are you there?
Hello, hi everybody. I'm Amanda. As Cindy mentioned, I'm here with Steve from Lee Spring. I'm going to talk to him all about his business and some of the things that they've been doing to help the city and the country get through the COVID pandemic. So let me just flip my camera around here so you can all see Steve. Hello, Steve. Welcome.
Hello, Amanda. Thank you, Cindy, for the introduction. And hello, everybody.
So can you tell us a little bit about Lee Spring and what you do?
Absolutely. I mean, we had a little bit of an introduction as it makes sense right downstairs from us, the Makerspace, because as he said, we have several spring makers here, actually up to 4 now that were trained down there, that went through their training program, our apprenticeship program, and come up here to make springs. So what is a spring? Most people think of a spring as a compression spring, and this would be the most common type of spring. You'll find it in your ballpoint pen. You'll find it, maybe you're using one of these to hold your mask a little tighter these days. It's got a little spring in it. Even the basic paper clip is a form of spring. It is something that when you give it a force, it reacts with an equal and opposite force, whether that's a compressive force, a torquing force, or an extending force. So these are all the different types of springs we make, and we'll make them in, as you said, in lots of different shapes and sizes. We'll make compression springs that you can hold 1,000 in the palm of your hand, to compression springs behind us that you can see that are rather large, and we make them much bigger than that go in deep sea drilling or construction equipment, agriculture, etc., trains. So we make a wide variety, and our springs generally start with wire, but they can also start with flat materials. So, you know, a spring like this is important in hospitals. This keeps the power going. If there's a sudden power outage, they shift what their source of power is to a backup power, and these little things make that happen in, you know, measures of nanoseconds to keep their operators and everything going to completely flat disc style springs, and to this type of spring, which you would see as constant force spring, which you would see in like a measuring device or at the airports when you're pulling those things to cordon off the lines, etc. So we make all sorts of springs used for all sorts of things in all sorts of sizes. Torsion springs can come with 2 torsion legs. They can come in all sorts of odd and funky shapes, and again, they can be much larger. So we focus on making springs, as she said, more than 25,000, these days more than 30,000 different spring designs we will make in any given year.
I think, I would guess that certainly for myself, when most people think about springs, they kind of think about that standard coil design, but, when you see those really small little coil springs and then you see these all different shapes, these bigger springs, is there really that much of a difference between the composition and how they're made from these cheaper kind of ballpoint pen springs versus?
There is. So I mean, the ballpoint pen spring is an example of a spring that everyone knows, but it's not something we would make at Lee Spring. The tolerance and need, the quality of these springs is not sufficient to merit a high value added manufacturer like Lee Spring. These would be made in low cost countries. But even in low cost countries where we produce today, we're making highly value added springs. So a little spring like this, relevant today, I don't know if you can even see that. This spring is a spring that is an important component of ventilators. So the exact force of this at several different places within the cycle of it is very critical. This is a spring that we make for a company that makes ventilators that ramped up from just a few thousand a year to we're making 800,000 of these during the height of the pandemic to make sure that everybody in the country had ventilators for themselves. And we make lots of different springs like this. Or this spring, which is a larger spring, which we're ramped up on right now, which goes in a COVID test kit. So things like that, the exact measurement of those and the strength of those are really critical. A lot of these springs, as I mentioned about this one, which is the backup to hospital, the material that's used, the exact alloy, the shape of it, the wire thickness, the outside diameter, the length, how coils are closed or open, the distance between coils, all of those things have to be measured very carefully to make sure that the spring has the desired rate, strength when you are using it in its application, and has to fit precisely, often into a very small cavity and work.
Now you mentioned ventilators and test kits. Now, how did the COVID pandemic affect your business?
Well, a drastic change to our business, for sure, which is most of our companies that we produce springs for were shut down, or at least a sizable percentage of them. And so we had a lot of orders that were pushed out, some canceled, and we had a lot of companies that just, the volume of their requirements dropped significantly, 30, 40%. At the same time, we had certain manufacturers, whether it's the ventilators, the test kits, hospital beds, diabetes measuring equipment, things like that, that are more directly related to the pandemic, even pop-up tents for the drive-through COVID tests that were going on.
Right, well, can we take a walk down to the factory and take a look at where some of these things
sounds like
are?
a great idea. Or even like your people are staying in shape. This is Pilates equipment. We do a lot of exercise equipment, things like that that were needed during the pandemic. So we were able to, and with our essential business manufacturing designation, we were able to stay with everybody here working throughout the pandemic.
So did you close at any point?
We did not. We never closed. We have been open the entire time. And most of our customers were calling. We had about 60 or 70 letters from key customers in the opening days of the pandemic mandating that we stay alive and running. So we're going to walk into our factory now. It's going to be a little noisier because the machines are running right now. That said, we're running on split shifts right now because of the trying to keep distance. So in our office, only about a third of the workers are in at a time. And in the factory, about 40% of them are in at any given time. So it's a little more quieter, a little more spread out than it normally would be to make sure that everybody is safe, or if, God forbid, somebody does contract COVID, they're not going to pass it on to somebody else. So on our left side here in the frame, this is all of our raw material. We store all this in a way that makes it very easy to grab and use. Everything under 50 pounds is stored in here so that we can grab it, swing it over here, throw it on what we call a dereeler, which feeds the machine over here, the coiling machine that actually produces the springs. This is what we'll unwind to do it, and then we heat. This is called a dereeler. It unreels or a decoiler, lots of different names for it. A payoff reel, they call it. It feeds, this turns and feeds the wire into the machine over here. We'll walk around and show you one of the machines. Oh, Mike. So, this would be, turn it off. This is a machine that makes springs. So it comes through the wire into here, and there's all sorts of tooling. You can follow, this is fine wire, so it's hard to see probably on the video, but it feeds into the tooling, all wedged in here, that creates the pitch, the outside diameter, and the length of the spring before cutting it off. You can see some of the tooling that's used. So these are all various standard tools that are used to make the springs. We also make our own tooling on machines like you saw just at the Makerspace to make individual customized springs. After that, they'll run through an oven. We have all inline ovens. They drop in an oven. They come out, not too hot. They come out, and this heat takes the stress out of the spring and makes it keep its now newly formed shape.
after heating, we will grind the springs. People generally are feeding the springs one by one and grinding, but we're doing some R&D. You can see in this area where we are working on a new robotic cell where instead of the people feeding the springs, they will program robots. Cobots they're called, because these robots can be side by side with people and they'll stop and won't hurt anybody. But this is designed to pick up springs off a conveyor that comes off the oven and feed these grinding plates over here, which are 3D printed. And eventually that will, we will switch from all people feeding springs to people programming the robots. So one person feeds a grinding machine right now. In the future, they'll be able to program 3 robots very easily to feed 3 different machines.
We've got a question from the audience
Yeah.
here. Let me just,
Please.
actually a couple of questions. How many people work at Lee Springs?
We have about 400 employees worldwide.
400 employees. And does all of your research and development happen at the Brooklyn Army Terminal?
Most of our R&D happens here because it's our headquarters. We have a large group of engineers and a factory right here side by side. They cooperate and do R&D, yes.
Okay. Alrighty, so then once we go from here, let's see where we headed now.
So this would be setting a spring. So some critical applications require, Mario, smile for the camera.
Oh, Amanda, Amanda?
I think they lost.
Oh, they lost you.
There we go. We have it back.
Which is setting the spring to take some of the stress out of it as well. And you come this way.
Thank you.
And this is grinding the spring, so she's fitting these holes. And once the spring is underneath the inside there, 2 discs grind both sides of it to make it flat. And when we're done, we have lots and lots of springs. And you can see here at the end, the springs are ground flat. These are larger springs.
Now, do you know what these springs are for particularly?
These springs regulate the temperature in your water heater in your basement to prevent the water heater from exploding. Maybe you've seen that ad with the guy, Mr. Mayhem, where it explodes. This spring actually prevents that from happening.
Okay. And we got another question here. As an entry-level worker, where would you start if you were new to the company?
Well, for example, we've got a couple people on the floor today who started at the Makerspace. They applied through the New York EDC jobs program, got their initial training at the Makerspace, and then they're up here now doing an apprenticeship to eventually become a skilled worker here. But we have all sorts of different positions. A lot of them come in directly as well.
And does it take a really long time for somebody to become
Depending on
a...
the skill level of the position, it can take years, yes.
All right, let's get
And then
into
the next thing we do is we put springs here. These springs here are all ready to be tested. So all of our springs need to be tested. We can make 100,000 springs that we test a statistically significant sample of it, so that we know they're good. Or we may have a part for an airplane where we test every single one several times, 100% tested. So if you come in here, stay here. This is Sean, the program in here. This is Ray.
Hi, Ray.
Ray runs our testing here in New York City. We've got custom-built testing programs that Ray runs on these testing equipment that measure load and deflection. So Ray will can test any variety of springs. He's also got different gauges to measure the inside diameter springs, the outside diameter springs, and make sure that they meet the specifications that we set out or our customers set out.
And what are we looking at over here? This is another
This is
quality
another larger
control.
one of these load testers. So there's different. This is an old-fashioned load tester, just by hand, and this is a more modern computerized one that feeds all the data right back into our program. And we have these in various different sizes. So.
All right. So Steve, I just have one more question before I let you go. You have a really, this company has a deep roots here in Brooklyn. But when did you come to the Brooklyn Army Terminal, and what are the advantages of being here?
Yeah, well, we've been in Brooklyn since 1918, I think as Cindy said at the outset. We've been at the Brooklyn Army Terminal since 2008. One of the issues with the Brooklyn is we were in Dumbo for 40 years. We were in a bunch of locations that eventually became residential. And one of the advantages of the Brooklyn Army Terminal is it's state-owned, New York EDC run, and we know that this place will continue for years and years to be our home because it will always be for manufacturing and protected for that purpose. Number one. Number two, it's got great amenities, fantastic location, and it's very convenient to the employees that we already had working in the neighborhood. So it's got a great neighborhood full of people that are ready and willing to work.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Steve. It's really been a pleasure talking to you and learning all about Springs, something that I think, you know, most people don't think about too often, but plays such an important part in almost every part of our life every day. So thank you so much for talking to us. And I think we're going to turn it back to Cindy now.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks,
Cindy.
Steve.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you so much for joining us, and also to Lee Spring. It was so interesting to learn about their production and their long history in Brooklyn, as well as the contributions that they've made during this time of the pandemic. Now we're going to go live. So the Brooklyn Army Terminal has a variety of different kinds of manufacturers, and one of the growing segments of manufacturers really since the recession has been food manufacturing. And so we've learned so far about two different businesses, or an organization and a business, that made significant contributions during the pandemic and kind of mobilized during that time. But obviously food is also, has been extremely, access to food has also been extremely important. So we're gonna learn about how Norwegian Baked is faring, and Andrew Gustafsson is on the ground at Norwegian Baked. Andrew,
yeah, hi, Cindy. Can you see me okay? Hi, everybody. So yeah, we're here at the factory of Norwegian Baked. So we were just over in building B, and now we're in what's called the annex building of the Army Terminal. And this is actually home to several different food manufacturers. We already heard about one of them. Jacques Torres Chocolate is over in building B. But we're here at Norwegian Baked, and we're going to be speaking to the founder, Head Bake. So I'm just going to switch my camera around, and she's going to show us a little bit around their facility and tell us a little bit about the company.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Norwegian Baked. So happy to have you all here virtually. So welcome, velkommen, as we say in Norwegian.
So tell us a little bit about how you started the business.
So I started Norwegian Baked about 4.5 years ago. I was home in Norway for a summer vacation with the family, and my aunt was baking Norwegian knekkebrød, and it smelled so delicious. Went down to her house and got to taste it, and during that summer I was completely hooked. Went down there every day, like, can I have some? Can I have some? It's so delicious. And then by the end, it's like, Tante Lee, can you please teach me how to bake this? And she did. Coming back to Brooklyn, I was baking it for my family and then for friends, and then I baked sales at school, and everyone loved it. And the thought came like, there might be a market. Maybe this is it. This is what I should be. I should do this. So slowly then I had to figure out, how do you start a food business? And spoke to people, did lots of research online. Together with a friend, she came up with a name for me, Norwegian Baked. I found my doing business as, and then I made samples. And one day I went from store to store in Brooklyn with some samples and left them samples with a homemade business card and sales sheet. And they called back. One after the other store called back and said, we love it. Please send us a case. Send us 2 cases. And did that. And then again, they called back and they wanted more and more. And from there, it's just been snowballing, you know, to one more store and growing. And now today we have close to 100 stores all over the US that carry our fruit bread.
And people can also get it online, right?
Yes, and it's also available online on Etsy, which has also been a great platform as a new entrepreneur to sell and reach people all over the US. And that has been extremely very successful, especially now during COVID, where people are more food shopping online and have time to discover things. So, and it's been great fun to be part of Etsy and selling there.
Now, if people aren't familiar with the product, could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so you can have a look. So knäckebröd is a crisp bread, and it's like a cracker, but we store it, as you see, as more like a slice of bread. So what you do in Norway, instead of having a slice of bread with your breakfast and lunch, you would have a slice of knäckebröd. And on that, you will put your topping. In Norway, we love our open-faced sandwiches, and we love also everything that's more hearty, nutritious, full of fiber, and so on. So we have then the knäckebröd, which is based on rye flour and oats and oat bran. Have lots of good fiber there, and then you have the addition of lots of nutrient-rich seeds. And so it becomes a very substantial good meal when you have this, for example, for breakfast or lunch with butter, jam, cheese next to your soup, salad, or as my kids often, they will just have it as a snack by itself.
And so let's talk about how you actually make it. So can you walk us through the process?
Yeah, it's not so much a difference. Like if I was baking at home to what I'm doing here, the only thing is that we're doing it in a larger scale. So we have all our ingredients. We have our rye, flour, oats, and seeds that we first mix in the big mixer in the bowl. And in here, something that I learned that you don't usually normally do in Norway is I add olive oil to it. So when I was doing my aunt's recipe and other Norwegian recipes here, a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's good heavy, but it's very dry." And it's true. In Norway, knäckebröd is very dry. So I added olive oil to it, and then people were like, "We love it. You really nailed it." So first we mix all the dry. We have in our olive oil, and then you put in water, and that's it. So it's a very clean ingredient list. We also use all organic ingredients. Also, our olive oil is also organic. So you have your dry, then you mix the olive oil. You have put in your water, and from there you mix it. We put it out on our baking sheet, and here you can see some that are ready to go into the oven, like the cooking show one. And here it goes on the baking sheet, and it stands for a while, and then it goes into the oven. And here you can see Julia. This is in the oven. And because it's so flat and long, you have to twist the ovens around, the trays around in the oven, because if not, it will get very cooked on one side versus the other. So halfway through the baking, we twist them around. So that's a little.
So here we can see Julia, turning the trays around.
Yeah.
And so what's your production capacity like in here?
In here, so here we do anything from 300 to 400 units, bags of crisp bread in a day's production, depending on how the season, how busy it is, and so on. So when it gets really busy, then we produce much more in a day and have longer bake days.
And can you tell us how you came to find this space at the Brooklyn Army Terminal?
So, when I was at another rental kitchen where I was sharing a space with Granola Labs, and I don't know how did I hear about it. It was maybe through someone else who was here. So I came actually and visited this place when Salty Road was here, and she made candy. And I visited, saw her space, and then met with someone from the management office that showed me a space upstairs. And this was 2 years ago, and I was like, this is where I want to be. I want to get here because it's just so beautiful. The spaces are big, open, clean, these huge windows. You're looking out on the water, the boats coming in and out. So not only, one thing that is fun to be baking and doing, but you're in a place that really is beautiful to be in. And also there's so much energy because there's so much going on in all the different buildings here and so on. So you're part of this huge community of people. And EDC is also here to take good care of us. There's a lot of benefits to being part of EDC too, compared to being with a privately owned manufacturing place or warehouse where you can get a space. So yes, it's been all really good, and we're very happy to be here.
And so you mentioned another company, Granola Labs. So they also use this space, right?
Granola Lab and I used to rent from her, but then when this space became available, she was like, let's go in together and share this space. So we share this space, which is great. We have different bake days. So I have my bake days and she has her bake days. So if I need more, she needs more, we're flexible with each other and so on. So far we've been a year together here and it's been a great partner roommateship, if you call it that.
That's great. And how many people, work here when you're at, full capacity?
So today we're 3. We have Julia and Noel. Brendan is not feeling well today, so he's home. But when it gets really busy, we can have maybe my son. He would come and help out. He's 17, so he's great and finds it fun to come and work with us. So he'll come after school and help out. And then there's also maybe another person that I would call and say, can you come? So when it gets busy, we can bring in more people. But this is the team.
And you have some seasonality to your business too, right?
Seasonality to it. So now we're going to go towards the busy season. Now we have to see how it is this year, but hopefully.
And could you tell us a little bit about how your business has been impacted by COVID?
So we've been impacted, but not as severely as many other people. We have been very, very fortunate in the sense that people still want to eat our crisp bread. So if they couldn't go to the store and get it, or if their store closed down where they were getting it, they then came to Etsy and then bought it online. So a little bit sales went down for stores. Some stores has gone down more than others than what they usually order, but some stores are ordering more because they have redone their business model and it's working very well for them. What basically also has saved us when a lot of the bigger stores that we no longer working with because they're out of business is Etsy. All the people that are in love with going on Etsy or were in love with our crisp bread went to Etsy to find it and buy it. So sales on Etsy for me has gone up like 500-600%. And the fun thing with being on Etsy now is like all these people I didn't have contact with because they would go and buy at the store. But now I'm selling directly to them and I often write a little note on the invoice and then they will write a note back to me with the order. So now suddenly we have this exchange going forth and back and they write to me like, hope you're doing well. How are your children? How is it for the children to be back in school? How are you juggling it? And I will write a little note back to them and how are you doing? And then, so it's very fun that way. But again, that's, an added benefit of the Etsy experience, which is, though we're under this cloud of COVID and sadness, there's like all these like beautiful little things that are happening too.
That's great. So having that kind of diverse customer base and with stores and being online has been important.
And also we're having a lot of our stores, we're not in the big supermarket chains, we're all in small independently owned specialty food stores all over the US. So we're working very closely with them and getting the food out, getting our crisp bread to them and so on.
And I know all the New York stores are listed on your website. What if people don't live in New York? How can they find your product?
We have a website, norwegianbake.com, and under there is where to find. And there you find a list of stores in Brooklyn and Manhattan or all over the US. We have stores in San Francisco, in Austin, Texas, up in Minneapolis. It's like, it's all over. So you can find a place there or go to Etsy and find us there. And if you're in Brooklyn, you can go and visit Hiller and Moon, Green Brick Provisions, Shelsky's, Sahadi's. Everyone loves Sahadi's. In the city, there's Lifetime, Shalom Weber. There's lots of delicious, beautiful stores to go and find crisp bread ice.
Great. Well, I'm also a huge fan. So thank you so much for joining us. Before we cut away, Cindy, were there any questions that we missed that people have for Hedvig?
Nope. I think we covered all the questions. Unless if there's anybody who's interested in working for Norwegian Baked in the future, how might they connect with you, or how do you typically hire employees?
So the question we had was about hiring. How do you find your employees?
Hiring, find my employees. Noelle was through another friend who had a food business, and she was transitioning to a co-packer. So Alex had met with her at a social gathering, and they had spoken, and then it came up that we were looking, and she's like, oh, I have a great person who was working with me, and he now will be looking. So Noelle came and met with us, and yeah, so that's how he started with us. And Yulia just started working with us, and I posted a job posting now on Good Food Jobs, and that was a month ago, and got lots of resumes. It was amazing how many qualified and overqualified people that sent in their resume. Met with several of them, and Yulia was the one. She's the perfect match, and I'm so happy to have met her and that she wants to work with us and be part of our team.
That's great. It's obviously a hard time for a lot of people looking for work, but it's also great to see that there's a business and employer that's doing well and hiring people. But Hedvig, thank you so much for joining us today. And so Cindy, we'll turn it back to you. That's it from the Brooklyn Army Terminal. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us at Makerspace and Lee Spring and Norwegian Baked.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful program. I'd like to thank obviously our guests. So Scott from Makerspace, Steve from Lee Spring, and Hedvig from Norwegian Baked for taking the time today to participate in National Manufacturing Day and share their stories. In terms of the Brooklyn Army Terminal, as we heard today, it is a very important place for New York City's manufacturing base. As has been mentioned on the program, it's a city-owned site that's operated by the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And the NYC EDC, as it's otherwise known, is a nonprofit organization that really seeks to ensure that we can retain our industrial base here in New York City and provide affordable and good spaces to businesses like the ones that we visited today, and also to create good paying manufacturing jobs, which typically on average pay more than the retail sector. And so this idea of industrial retention that Steve talked about, the fact that he knows that the Brooklyn Army Terminal will continue to be an industrial site for years and years to come. And that's certainly a security that I know is important for many of the manufacturing businesses that have chose to be at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. We also learned today about how businesses have been contributing in different ways to the city in terms of supporting PPE production and helping us through this pandemic, or even making us food for sustenance. And so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Amanda Adler-Brennan and Andrew Gustafsson, for making their way out into these factory spaces and to the Brooklyn Army Terminal. This is honestly one of the first times we've sort of ventured out. We are hoping that there will be in-person tours in the not so distant future. And so if you follow us at turnstiletours.com, we do hope that at some point in time, we'll be able to do some socially distanced tours there. But in the meantime, we've got the virtual programs. We hope that you'll join us. We're cooking with Thai chefs once a week for the next several weeks. We're also participating in Made in NYC Week by having a special session next Thursday about adaptive design. We're going to bring on the Adaptive Design Association, Adaptability, as well as a company that makes garments, adaptive garments, called Undercare. And JobPath will be talking about how they create integrated employment opportunities for the manufacturing sector for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So thank you so much, everybody. We are grateful to you for your support, and we hope to see you soon. And special thanks to the New York City Economic Development Corporation for supporting this program and making it possible. Have a great day, everybody.